The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Not metaphorically. Literally. A slow, pounding thud in my ears that felt louder than the bailiff's voice, louder than the shuffle of papers, louder than the air conditioner fighting August heat. 3 rows back, my father sat perfectly still. Civilian clothes. No uniform. No rank. Just a man with his hands folded like this was church, and not the moment his daughter's life was about to be weighed. My sister Rachel sat beside him, angled slightly away from me, eyes fixed on the wall like I didn't exist. Like if she didn't look, none of this would be real. Then the judge asked my father one simple question. I watched the color drain from his face, and in that moment, before he even answered, I felt two things at once. Terror. And something dangerously close to freedom. 3 weeks ago, in a county courtroom that smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt coffee, I became a case number. My life reduced to paper clipped together, slid across a desk, labeled and summarized by strangers. The bailiff called it out in a flat voice. The judge looked up with tired eyes, the kind that had seen too many versions of this story and didn't expect mine to surprise him. I'm Sergeant Emily Carter, United States Army, 29 years old. And that morning my parents were testifying against me. Not the person who committed the crime. Not the thief. I sat at the defense table while the prosecutor laid out the charges. Identity theft. Credit card fraud. 7 credit cards opened in my name. $59,000 in debt I'd never spent. Every account traced back to one address, my parents' address. My mother sat behind me, and I could feel her disappointment like pressure on the back of my neck. Heavy, familiar, suffocating. The kind I'd grown up mistaking for motivation. My father didn't look at me at all. His hand rested on Rachel's shoulder instead. Protective. Reassuring. A silent message about who mattered in this room. The inversion was complete. I was the victim. And somehow, I was also the villain that I'd grown up believing. My father believed in accountability. In rules. In consequences. He was a military man too, or at least he used to talk like one. Right and wrong were supposed to be simple in our house. Clean lines. No gray areas. That belief shattered the moment he took the stand. Because when the judge leaned forward and asked him that one question, calm, precise, impossible to dodge, I realized I'd been wrong about him. About all of them. And before I tell you what the judge asked my father, you need to understand how we got there. Because this didn't start in a courtroom. It started with a credit alert. The alert came through on a Tuesday afternoon in the barracks hallway at Fort Cavazos. The air smelled like industrial cleaner and burnt coffee, someone's idea of productivity lingering too long. I was halfway between the laundry room and my door, boots still on, brain already switching to evening mode, when my phone vibrated. Credit alert. Significant change detected. I stopped walking. I'm methodical with money. Always have been. It's the military in me. Budgets, checklists, systems. I check my accounts every Friday. My credit score was solid. 760. Something I'd built slowly, carefully, like everything else in my life. I opened the alert. 760. To 458. Over 300 points. Gone. My hand started shaking so badly I had to sit down on the cold tile floor, back against the wall. Laundry bag spilling open beside me. I refreshed the screen. Once. Like that would fix it. It didn't. There were cards listed I didn't recognize. Capital 1. Discover. Another chase. Another Capital 1. 7 in total. All opened in my name. All maxed out. All overdue. I scrolled until my vision blurred. $59,214. That was the number at the bottom. Total damage. Almost $60,000 of debt I'd never touched. Then I saw the address. Every single account listed the same one, my parents' house. I stared at it for a long time, willing it to change. Didn't. Instead, my brain started doing what it does best. Pattern recognition. Dates lining up. Purchases clustering. Charges that looked suspiciously like things I'd seen online. I opened Instagram. Rachel had posted 3 weeks earlier. New boots. Caption, treating yourself. 2 weeks after that, new phone. Mirror selfie. Few days later, weekend trip. Smiling. Carefree. All time-stamped. All lining up perfectly with the charges. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't random fraud. This was my family. Growing up, Rachel was always the sensitive one. 4 years older. Big feelings. Fragile. If she cried, the house shifted around her. I learned early that there was a role waiting for me too. You're strong, Emily. You'll be fine. That sentence followed me everywhere. When money was tight, I paid my own way through community college. When I enlisted, I didn't ask for help. I sent it. Grocery money. Emergency cash. Just until Rachel gets back on her feet. I trusted my parents with my information because they were my parents. Because family was supposed to mean something. Because accountability was something I thought my father believed in as much as I did. I called him from the parking lot. The Texas heat hit me like a wall when I stepped outside, sweat already pooling under my collar. My heart was still racing when he answered. I expected confusion, anger, shock. What I got was silence. Not stunned silence. Careful silence. Finally he said, "Why don't you come home this weekend and we'll talk about it?" That was when I knew. Something in me went cold. The life I thought I was protecting, my career, my family, the version of us I'd kept intact in my head, started to unravel right there between my ear and that phone. The drive home took 3 hours. My jaw stayed clenched the entire way, teeth aching by the time I pulled into the driveway. For a moment I felt stupid hope. The house looked the same. American flag on the porch. Same flower pots. Same welcome mat. Then I noticed Rachel's car. Newer model. Genie. Parked like it belonged there. I flashed back to being 10 years old, skin torn open from a scraped knee, sitting on the porch steps trying not to cry because Rachel was inside having a meltdown. My father had passed me on the way out and said, "You're fine, Em. Go wash up. Your sister needs me." Inside, the air felt tight. Rachel sat on the couch, phone face down in her lap. My mother stood at the counter, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. My father leaned against the wall, arms crossed. No one hugged me. I didn't sit down. "How long?" asked. Rachel looked up first. "I was going to tell you," she said quickly. "I just needed time." My mother didn't look at me at all. That told me everything. My father cleared his throat. "Your sister's been struggling." "I borrowed it," Rachel added. "I was going to pay it back." I laughed once. Came out wrong. "You don't borrow someone's identity. You're in the army," my father said. "You have a steady paycheck. You're fine." There it was. The sentence that had followed me my entire life, that I laid out my offer calmly. A repayment agreement. Timeline. Or I report the fraud. Those were the only options. Rachel shook her head. "That's not fair." My father nodded. "She's right. We're not turning this into a legal mess. And if I do?" I asked that. He didn't hesitate. "Then don't come back here." I stood there for a moment longer waiting for someone, anyone, to stop me. No one did, so I walked out without another word. And by the time I reached my car, I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth. The detective didn't hesitate. He scanned the paperwork once, flipped the page, then looked up at me and said, "This is identity theft." Clear as day. I felt something loosen in my chest for the first time in weeks. Not relief, validation. The kind that reminds you you're not crazy. That the facts still matter somewhere. I filed the report that afternoon. My father left a voicemail that night. His voice was tight, controlled. "You've crossed a line," he said. "You've embarrassed this family." I replayed it twice before deleting it. Because in that moment, embarrassment felt almost quaint. A small word for something that had already blown past shame and landed squarely in truth. 3 weeks later, we were in a courtroom, and between, I didn't sleep. My dreams were replaced by numbers. Balances, interest rates, minimum payments. I'd wake up at 0300 with my heart racing, convinced I'd missed a deadline that didn't even belong to me. During the day, I did what I'd always done. Showed up. Hit every standard. Passed every inspection. On paper, I was still a model soldier. Off paper was another story. My commander called me in for a meeting. My credit report sat on the desk between us like a live wire. "This could become a problem," he said carefully. I nodded. Explained. Showed the police report. The documentation. He sighed. "For now, it's a personal issue." Just like that, my life collapsed into a footnote. The banks were worse. They called constantly. Morning. Numbers I didn't recognize. Each conversation started the same way. "You'll need to prove that you didn't open these accounts." As if someone could steal your name and then politely leave fingerprints. I faxed reports. Uploaded affidavits. Mailed copies of my ID so many times I started to memorize the tracking numbers. Every step felt like begging to be believed about my own life. When it got quiet, I made the mistake of scrolling. Rachel kept posting. I told myself I was gathering evidence, but really it was something closer to self-harm. like pressing on a bruise just to feel it again. Then I saw it. A selfie in a department store mirror. Caption: fresh start energy. I pulled up my records. A $2,300 charge. Same store. Same timestamp. That was when the anger drained out of me and left something heavier behind. Grief. Not for the money. For the idea that family was supposed to protect you from the world, not become another thing you had to survive. Detective Harris called 2 days later. "We've got a clear pattern," he said. "Multiple accounts. IP addresses. Text messages tying it together." My stomach dropped. "It's going to court." Then he paused. "Sometimes families show up," he added. "Just, not always for the reason you hope." The night before the hearing, my father called again. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. He talked about Rachel's future. Her record. Her chances. Then he said, "If you loved your sister, you'd drop the charges." I answered without raising my voice. "If you loved me, you wouldn't ask me to." He hung up. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror and chose a navy blazer and a white blouse. Not my uniform. That I didn't want them to see a soldier. I wanted them to see a person. Rachel arrived looking smaller than I remembered. No makeup. Shoulders rounded. Fragility worn like armor. My parents entered behind her, immediately closing ranks. Hands on her arms. Whispering. A wall. When my mother testified, she said, "She's not a criminal. She's a good person who got overwhelmed." When my father took the stand, he didn't look at me once. "My other daughter has always been resentful," he said evenly. "She's using this to punish her sister." Just like that, my life was rewritten. My discipline became cruelty. My boundaries became vengeance. The years I'd spent being fine were reframed as something ugly. I didn't feel angry, I felt hollow. Because watching your parents testify for the person who stole your life does something to you. It empties you out in a way no institution ever could. And then the judge leaned forward and asked my father a question he couldn't outrun. The judge didn't react right away. His pen moved slowly across the page, deliberate, almost meditative. His eyes lifted, not to Rachel, not to me, but to my parents. Studying, measuring, like he was deciding whether what he was hearing matched what he was seeing behind me. I could feel my parents' confidence settling in. They thought they'd done it, framed it cleanly. Rachel sat small and folded into herself, the picture of a daughter worth saving, the kind people lean toward instinctively. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe all of this was worse than living with a lie. Maybe I should have just carried it like I always had. The old voice whispered, familiar and steady, "Don't rock the boat. You can handle it." The judge set his pen down. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he said evenly, "please remain standing." My father's hand closed around my mother's, a reflex. Bracing together. Unit. The way they always had been. The judge summarized their testimony calmly, accurately. He repeated their claims, that this was a family matter, that Rachel was overwhelmed, that I was acting out of resentment, that my police report was unnecessary, excessive. Then he stopped. I didn't ask a question yet. The silence that followed fell like a weight. Even the air seemed to freeze. No shifting, no coughing, no whispering. The judge glanced at his notes again. "There are 7 credit cards," he said. "Nearly $59,000 in charges. All linked to your residence." He looked up. "You are aware that identity theft and credit card fraud are felonies?" No one answered. The room held its breath. Then he asked it. "At any point before or after this was discovered," he said, voice steady, "did you offer to repay, co-sign, or otherwise assume responsibility for the $59,000 your daughter Rachel incurred in Sergeant Carter's name?" My father's mouth opened. Nothing came out. 0.5 seconds passed. My mother's breathing turned shallow. My father stared at the floor like it might give him an answer. The judge leaned forward slightly. "I didn't ask if you could afford it," he clarified. "I asked if you offered." The word came out barely above a whisper. "No," it landed with a dull thud. The judge didn't pause. "Did you propose a payment plan?" "No." "Did you contact any creditors on her behalf?" "No." "Did you take any steps toward restitution?" "No, Your Honor." My father's shoulders sagged, just slightly. Like something heavy had finally slipped. The judge nodded once. "You've asked this court to view Sergeant Carter's report as vindictive," he said. "Yet you took no action to mitigate the harm done to her." He let that sit. It appears you expected her to absorb the consequences on her own. My mother broke then. Not the controlled tears she'd practiced, but deep, shaking sobs that echoed in the quiet room. The judge's voice didn't soften. The evidence presented is substantial, he said. Documented financial records. Communications. A clear pattern. He lifted his gaze. This matter will proceed to trial. Bail conditions were set. No contact. Passport surrendered. Mandatory check-ins. Then he said the words that split something open in me. This court does not require one child to sacrifice their future to preserve the comfort of another. Accountability is not cruelty. It is justice. I looked at Rachel. Her face wasn't filled with fear or regret. It was anger. That's when I understood. She wasn't sorry she'd done it. She was sorry I'd refused to carry it for her. When the judge dismissed the room, I stood. My legs felt strangely steady, grounded in why parents didn't follow. They closed ranks behind Rachel one last time. And for the first time I didn't go with them. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. Not because anything had been fixed. Not because the damage was undone. But because the truth had been spoken out loud. By someone with authority. In a room where lies usually win by being louder. The trial was still ahead. Consequences would take years to fully land. But for the first time since the alert lit up my phone, I felt solid ground beneath my feet. My father's version of events, the one where I was dramatic, vindictive, unreasonable, had finally collapsed under its own weight. And it hadn't been me who destroyed it. The waiting period that followed was longer than any deployment I'd ever done. There were no explosions, no clear objectives, just weeks of circling thoughts that wouldn't settle. Life on base continued like nothing had happened. Reveille at dawn. Orders still precise. I kept my head down, my record clean, followed up with every creditor like clockwork. Physical exhaustion has an endpoint. This didn't. Rachel didn't reach out. She couldn't court order, but even if she could, she wouldn't have. In her story, I was the enemy. The one who broke the unspoken rule. We don't expose family, no matter the cost, and why parents were silent too. No text. No updates. No checking in. It felt deliberate. Like punishment. I kept my phone close anyway, waiting for an apology that never came. Detective Harris called exactly 4 weeks after the hearing. She's accepted a plea deal, he said. The terms were clinical. 2 years suspended. 5 years probation. Mandatory financial counseling. 200 hours of community service. Full restitution. $59,000 plus interest. Her income level. It would take more than 10 years to pay back. Miss one payment, and she'd serve the full sentence. I didn't feel joy. Or victory. I felt something quieter. The knowledge that the consequences existed outside my body now. That I wasn't carrying them alone. I met my father at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. Neutral ground. He looked older. His hands shook when he lifted the cup. I didn't handle this right, he said, then carefully. I thought I was protecting your sister. I didn't see I was hurting you. I met his eyes. You saw. You just decided it was acceptable. He swallowed. I didn't think you'd break. I didn't, I said. I bent. There's a difference. He told me he should have stood with me in that courtroom. Yes, I said. You should have. It wasn't reconciliation. It was an inventory of damage. I told him my boundary plainly. I will not be sacrificed to keep the peace anymore. My mother wasn't ready, he said. When she is, I answered. She can call me. We didn't hug. The first restitution check arrived 2 weeks later. $412. It barely registered financially. But that night, I slept fully for the first time in months. Because the paper trail said what I'd needed someone to say from the beginning. This was not yours to carry alone. The sentencing hearing was quieter. Heavier. No character witnesses this time. Rachel looked different. Smaller, not fragile, just diminished. My parents sat farther back, separated by a small but unmistakable gap. The judge read the sentence. Probation. Community service. Counseling. Restitution. A felony conviction. Rachel's shoulders slumped slightly. No drama. Just the end of a chapter. So we left. My father approached me, stopped a few feet away. You got what you wanted, he said. No, I replied. I got what was right. He walked away without answering. It was the last time I saw my mother in person. Back on base, my commander followed up. You handled this the right way, he said. Integrity. It was a word my father used to claim as his own. Healing came slowly. My credit score crept upward point by point. Counts closed. Fraud notes added. In therapy, I finally said the sentence out loud. My family chose my sister over me, layers peeled back. Weight I didn't know I'd been carrying. Anger I learned to let pass instead of swallowing whole. The payments kept coming. Clockwork. Never satisfying. But they mattered. Not as punishment, but as acknowledgement. Nearly a year later, I ran into my father at a grocery store. He looked thinner. Tired. I didn't raise you to turn on your family, he said. The old instinct flared. To explain, soften, absorb. Instead I said, you raised me to tell the truth. I just stopped lying for everyone else. He nodded. No argument. No apology. My mother never reached out. And eventually I stopped waiting. The surprise wasn't the loss, it was the space that came after it. I moved into a small apartment closer to base. Clean. Quiet. Clean. I hung my uniform carefully, not because I had to, but because I chose to. My therapist said something once that stuck. Being the easy one isn't a compliment. It's a warning sign. I used to think strength meant being undemanding, absorbing impact, keeping things smooth. Now I know better. Strength is saying no without apology. Strength is letting people sit with the consequences of their choices. Sometimes late at night I think about the version of my life where I stayed quiet, tired, resentful, still cleaning up messes that weren't mine. Then I look around at the calm I've built. And I know I chose right. People say family is everything. What they mean is family is supposed to be safe. When it isn't, when love comes with conditions that require self-destruction, that's not loyalty. That's control. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped holding it together with my silence. And if you're listening to this, carrying something you didn't cause, know this. You are not cruel for choosing accountability. You are not heartless for refusing to be used. And you are not alone. We don't heal by staying quiet. We heal by telling the truth together.